My question, first of all, before introducing myself, is how many of you have been in a mission? Okay, and how many of you have any police or military background? Okay, any judges? Prosecutors? Okay. The reason I'm asking is that originally I've been working at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Slovak Republic at the Security Policy Department, and I established a mission unit. When our country had internal political problems, I joined the OSCE Mission to Latvia, which was one of the very few conflict prevention missions dealing with the Russian-speaking population and their citizenship status. Later on, I was in Kosovo, and as you know, Slovakia doesn't recognize it till now. But we, as civilian experts, handled with evacuation. We handled with NATO teams. We were not member of at that time. And later on, I also joined the EU and OSCE election observation missions in the Balkans and other parts of the world, where I have pleasure to meet some friends with. So there are many missions you can join, but there are still some friends and contacts you can share with. And before talking about it, I would like to ask you or to share with you my situation and the ministry. You may help me to imagine. It was year 2004. My country joined NATO as other countries with transitional experience. There was a UN Security Council resolution on Afghanistan, and NATO decided to create so-called provincial reconstruction teams to support not only the UN resolution, but also the institution in which were missing in the country quite a long time. This part of the country, which was mainly belonged to the Pashto tribes, was covered mainly by US presence. The easiest one was, Bamiyan was covered by New Zealand, and the rest, the north, was mixed up with the British and German and Dutch contingent military presence. My boss gave me task during one meeting, like, it's up to you where your country will have a civilian representative. We don't have finances for military contribution, and let's create a contingent with any country we can join. So my question to you: how would you start with? How would you find civilian experts? How would you deal with which country would you choose for? And what kind of experts would you like to start with? In a country which doesn't have embassy, which you don't have embassy in the beginning. Imagine, Pashto is mostly a drug area. North is mixed up, it's ethnically mixed with the Russian-speaking neighborhood. And the center is not politically interesting at all. Let's put it this way. New Zealand was a peaceful zone in comparison with others. So after all these lessons you have with the Human Resources EU, how would you start to make your own mission from your own country?
Maybe you are there to support the chief of command from the mission, and you will speak with them, to address with them to see where in these places they need someone, and you will select this person to send to this point?
Partially, yes. One thing is that we had no chance to visit Afghanistan. We were based in the capital, and there were only delegations from these countries coming in, asking us for some support. So the first thing, what we've done, we discussed it with, of course, with USA, Dutch, British, and German delegations. And you had to clarify 2 points. One thing is the financial, or the payment of the experts you want to send with them, and the other thing is also development projects, because you have to cover some of them. And unfortunately, that was the reason we didn't sign the contract with the British contingent in Mazar Sharif, which was quite interesting for us, but with the Germans, because the Germans offered us that our 2 experts can join the provincial reconstruction team, the military and civilian part, with their projects. So our idea was to find 2 kinds of experts. One was ladies, sociologists, experts for small groupings supporting human rights, especially women and minorities. And the other one was a hydrologist, I think, expert for water projects, because the lack of water in Afghanistan is also an issue. And they've been based in Kunduz, covering three provinces in the north. The other part of this negotiation, which was useful or important to share, was memorandum of understanding between the ministries of the respective countries. It means the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Germany and Slovak Republic had to sign a memorandum with all the details, how these people have to be handled. You mentioned during the previous presentation, you mentioned the issue of security clearance. It is not easy for any civilian to join NATO mission. Especially you have to have not only security clearance, but you have to have clarified status. What is, I think, already done in the Czech Republic is that these people who are in roster, they can ask for a security clearance in advance. What we had to do at that time was that we didn't have opportunity to select them as staff of the ministry, but we gave them special status, and we also made an exception via the minister to ask for security clearance, although being just a citizen. Yes, please.
This security clearance is a national level or have to be NATO level?
First, it should be a national level. There are several levels. I mean, NATO, you have restricted, confidential, secret, and super secret. And we agreed with the Germans that they will have the lowest level of security clearance, not because of mistrust, but because of the beginning of the PRT. It was successfully done, and one thing I really recommend to you while you go for a mission and you have to handle with the ministry, ask at least for so-called service passport, if not diplomatic one. The reason behind this is not to make your life more diplomatic in a mission, because you don't have it this Vienna Convention status before being accredited. But the problem is that the service passport gives you a different visa situation for evacuation plans. We have been studying it with the countries, neighboring countries, where our people could evacuate, and we handled it with in the memorandum that this is the precondition of the foreign minister memorandum signature, that those people will have diplomatic passport exceptionally, and they have to sign a letter of non-violating the Vienna Convention. And it helped a lot, because since the beginning you don't have the embassy there, or you are not in direct contact in a nearby embassy, then you are somehow respected. The other issue you have to solve is the contract of these civilian experts with the ministry. Did you ever have any contract with the Czech ministry while going for a mission? What does it say?
Actually, it is 3 or 4 pages.
No, but briefly, what does it say? Do you have a...
There are some obligations, and rights, and so forth. Actually, it's pretty clear contract.
Because there are some countries, they have just one sentence with while giving service passport to the mission member or to a citizen is that you don't have any obligation with the ministry except of respecting the Vienna Convention. So there are different tricks and methods how to avoid, responsibility of the ministry. The best version is to have at least ad hoc working contract with these people within the ministry, because then they are protected and they have also some responsibilities. What we had the difficulties to deal with later on was also media communication with these experts in our country. These people, as civilian experts, they feel free to express their opinion, and suddenly they, as we didn't write it down, they expressed some opinion what was wrong and what was good in the mission. And you can criticize also the German side for organizational things. Luckily enough, we solved it later, but it is also recommended to, and it was taken in account from the Czech side, that those people who have been in PRT Logar had strict media policy. One person on behalf of all, also radio, TV presentation and video and other information on the ministry webpage. Which is quite useful, because and then you can share your experience, and they also had a yearly report. The difference between the Czech and Slovak contribution within PRT was that the Czech team took the whole province in Logar, while we were part of the German PRT. It's quite an issue. And later on, wait a minute. There was also an issue how to deal with the reporting towards the German or the leading PRT nation, and also reporting to the respective Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in your case, Czech Ministry, which is, we agreed that we will have a so-called monthly summary report, while our civilian experts provided weekly report to the German side. We also gave them some basic reporting guidelines. You have to understand that each organization has a different sample or different questions, and they have been experts on different subjects. Military language is different, and the civilian experts have also different expressions. Later on, I will also give you, via Mr. Kulda, I will give you the samples I have from different organizations, but it's mostly from the election reports. It is important to make it short and brief. On the other hand, as I mentioned, the security clearance, it should be also very, very sensitive in terms of difficult questions. After the first 6 months, these people felt a little bit frustrated, or how to say, out of civilization. And what we suggested and succeeded with support of our NATO delegation in Brussels was that we made a common presentation of those civilians within NATO and with the German PRT leading nation, which you would be surprised that in Afghanistan there are 34 provinces. Almost each country, NATO country, tried to make a presentation how successful they are. But what we tried to make during this presentation was mostly what is missing in the mission. It is because once you are taking a lead of one province, it doesn't mean that the whole country is going the same direction. What is the problem within the province and with Kabul as the capital? Because sometimes the leading personalities or politicians play games behind, while the population has needs for projects and their basic needs, which might be quite contradictory. So these things were quite useful for a different view. And after visiting Brussels, our experts felt more part of the national team. And the final phase of mission, I think PRT Logar was more successful because you created a combination of military and civilian presence for several years with quite a useful US info support. And usually if you want to make a mission in such a difficult country, it is useful to be there more than 1 year. Then you can see some success and some results. The final phase is, it means you have to cooperate with NATO or with the organization which provided whole information, and also to coordinate the projects with the leading nation in the respective province. Unfortunately, the situation in Afghanistan is a little bit different than we think or we see in media, but I hope the presence there is still useful. All the documents I will provide you with in the attachment of your coordinator, but the point was that it was our first experience of this kind, and then we realized that NATO and EU countries, they may have some different missions, but still they lack a system. And I was really impressed by the Czech government, what you did in between. Because you created not only the roster, but you created a system how to select people, and also to combine people with different background and applications for different organizations. You have OSCE applications together with EU, NATO, and you have a system of so-called focal point who deals with that, including these trainings, which is really useful. Opa, what's that? Okay. What I wanted to mention to you that except of this OSCE and EU missions, I've been also part of so-called ad hoc mission. Like last year there was an election audit in Afghanistan. There was a very sudden need for experts to make election audit, which was not expected, and there was a political deal of U.S. government with Afghan President Karzai that they will make a recount of the election results, while the politicians have to make some deal with the power sharing. At that time, I've seen the difference between the EU or UN organizations and the American ones, because this deal was agreed in June, and by the end of July, there was almost nobody except of Americans in the country. That's maybe the difference with the EU presentation you had before, that they are very careful with the selection process. And they have, I think, quite qualified people, but there are certain countries who are prepared for such ad hoc need, and there is also a need to make evaluation how to improve the system. You have international organizations like OSCE which have limited area. Usually they cover the area of from Vladivostok to Vancouver, but the point is, partially Afghanistan was involved. Unfortunately, after the March event where people were killed in that hotel, OSCE tried to avoid to repeat the situation. EU had difficulties to arrange the mission because there were several missions already in other worlds, and there was a need to deploy more than 100 experts. So they have been doing 2 calls from different national states just to fulfill this 100 members quota. What really surprised to me was the logistics. Unfortunately, to deploy 100 people with all the security measures is one thing, but the logistics, including accommodation, was not solved properly, and many people suffered with the basic things, and that has input on the results. NATO at that time had different and has a different task. UN in Afghanistan with the election audit was involved with the UNDP. They were so-called auditors, while we observers were on the other side. The UNDP auditors were also, how to say, collected from different world, and their quality and financial issues were really questionable. IOM at that time was not so involved because IOM is running a project. On the other side, they are preparing so-called IDs in Afghanistan as a project, so they couldn't, how to say, control themselves. And we have been there via development agency USAID, which is interesting because they make a call for contribution and suddenly several organizations go for it, as NDIRI or Democracy International, and we have been there with a little NGO called Creative Associates, and there was a different logistics, and they were quite useful for that issue. Why I'm saying that, because the financing of this organization and this roster is quite important for the efficiency. You may meet many colleagues or friends or professionals in international missions like EU or OSCE, but if you compare it with the action or input, then American operations are quite efficient. I can tell you just one thing. There have been many logistical and personal issues with this mission, and it's quite difficult to get rid of the so-called troublemakers. There are some people, they simply take mission as a chance to receive another income, and they don't care about the system itself. And in our mission, there have been 3 people fired during 2 days without any difficulties, because they have been simply not following the rules. Is there any experience of this kind for you? Was there anybody fired during your mission? Yeah? Okay. So it is important that to mention that these organizations like OSCE, EU, NATO, UN, IOM, Czech Republic is a member of. So you still can apply for it. But with international NGOs like National Democratic Institute or Republican Institute, the Carter Center or Asian Network of or NMO NGOs, it's quite a different methodology. Do you know how it works there? The point is, usually they work on the domestic NGO network. You have to be a member, active or former member of a local NGO, and then with your CV you may apply or get through contacts for their missions. NDI is, for instance, financing ENEMO. ENEMO is a network of NGOs, mostly from the former Yugoslavia and Soviet Union, plus Romania, Slovakia, and they are financing it, for instance, for elections in Ukraine, while the Carter Center celebrated the 100 missions in their history, but they have totally different logistic security arrangements. More simpler, I would say. They are more focused on electric equipment than security. On the other hand, I think they are quite successful. Depends on the leader. Just one example for all. We have been in Egypt, where there was no other international organization, and because Mr. Carter knew the chief of SCAF, Security Council, at that time we were the only one allowed to stay there and follow the elections. But in general, as I mentioned before, sometimes you are backing up some political negotiations behind you have no idea about. And what is important with other missions is also that there are Nordic countries or America or British contingent which are supported by the development aid agencies. It means that you have missions and they are selected via roster, which is especially financially supported with these organizations, but they have a follow-up after the mission, and they do their own projects in the country. One example, SIDA was not going to Ethiopia because they have some projects in different countries of Africa. They simply make their own choice. And I mentioned also Czech development aid because it has quite good reputation, but it's a different stage and situation now. This is the map of EU missions. Your Danish colleague mentioned before. I'm showing it just on a map to have a different understanding that you see the European neighborhood, the migration issues, and there are military and civilian missions as such ones. But the point is, and this is an issue, that there are not so many and not all EU nations in the missions. And for comparison, these are UN missions. Coincidentally, there are 16 EU missions and 16 UN missions. Tell me, what is the difference in your understanding between these missions? What is the difference between the EU and UN mission as such?
Different mandate for the mission, different tasks or different goals.
Difference is participants.
Even in this, but sometimes they can be in the same country.
Through European Union, the same culture, and the United Nations is over the world.
It
is easier to control, to build mission and to control mission. And the United European Union is government. It's government if you take it as a whole. But what is United Nations?
Maybe basically it's the same. It works like a joint operation. It's, both of them is like to support, like maybe to share budget also on resources and something like that.
Let's think about the recent situation in Ukraine or previous one in Kosovo. What was the difficult situation? Why there was no UN mission there?
Because EU doesn't have Security Council in the 5 leading nations, including Russia. So the Security Council, they don't want UN involvement in Russia, so just UN representative from Russia says no, and that's it. It's a much harder and difficult process to put something through the Security Council of UN.
Yeah, there is a political reason behind that. It's true. Sometimes China also is absent while voting for the resolution. But what is the difference for you as mission members being there is that UN has usually the right to have weapons with them and carry weapons and to use it. Just one example, we have been there in Kosovo. It was the time February '99, and you've heard that in March, when Czech Republic joined NATO, we evacuated as OSCE mission as such. The reason behind was not only political one, the so-called Račak massacre, but also the issue that in Kosovo the weather has improved, and UČK leaders, the Kosovo Albanian army, did move from the mountains to the cities, and they started to fight against the Serbian army. And we have been there as civilian, non-weaponed experts, although some of them have been with police or military background, but we couldn't use any weapon for our protection. That was the main issue. And the same is also the question in Ukraine. Whatever reforms you want to do there, it is fine, but if you have to observe the situation there and at the border, or if the fight starts, then you need also your protection to be solved.
But sorry, but from my point of view, there is no big difference between UN and the CSTV mission. It is about mandate. So today you have Kosovo Verification mandate. So mostly they are armed. And before UN were there, and they were also armed. I think it is about mandate, not about.
Yes, but the mandate has to follow some negotiations, and the political negotiations is something we don't take part in it. I mean, we are just fulfilling the mandate, we as mission members. And what I wanted to mention to your participation is also that you have this development cooperation strategy, the second one already, prepared for 7 years. And when you as Czech citizens apply for any international mission, it should be in so-called accordance with foreign policy goals, which I'll declare in this development cooperation strategy, and you have several groups. You may compare it with the maps I gave you with the UN and EU missions, and there is also Afghanistan as territorial priority, Bosnia, Ethiopia, and mention it. And these countries have also the project countries. They have also non-cooperation program, and they are also sectoral priorities. Because I've heard that some of you have different background than being militaries, police, or civilian experts on democracy. And this is important, because if you have somebody as an expert for environment, agriculture, or social development, that's exactly what you have to fulfill as mission members. The reason I'm telling you is that these development strategies, it comes with OECD membership. Our countries as OECD members have to give 0.1% GDP for such projects, and it is national government the decision which priorities we will follow. Also, we have some transitional experience, and you have some from colleagues in the EU mission in Georgia, Moldova, or Serbia, and that's the reason behind that, because you can combine all your goals, national foreign policy goals, with the international missions. How many of your colleagues are in Georgia? Do you know already?
No.
I know two. I know about two.
Yeah, in Georgia. Yeah.
I think.
No, I think about 5.
I know about two at least.
But it definitely it used to be 5 and maybe more.
I see.
It's not only police,
And I didn't follow the previous presentation as deeply, but sometimes it is important when you apply for these EU specialized missions, EU missions or UN missions, that you have the concrete training they require for. And I asked your colleagues already that if this training belongs to so-called entry network, European New Training Initiative for Civilian Crisis Management. The point is that this entry network is respected via EU missions. And sometimes it is required, including security training called HEAT, Hostile Environment Assessment Training. And it is also respected for OSCE and UN missions. Has anybody of you done any HEAT training or entry training?
we call it EHAS.
It's old name, yeah.
In China.
But not anymore.
Couple of hours.
No. One of you or? No, it's just electronic forms.
Yeah.
You have done it?
And then, do you know the Folkdevelopment Academy, Swedish agency?
Of course.
Yes. And the Swedish agency is cooperating amongst others with the EU, providing different kind of trainings.
Yeah. So if
So this is my also question, because the Folkdevelopment Academy is proper one. It's a real training equal. We passed it in Kabul in Afghanistan, during our mission there. But I think that it is uncomparable with some kind of this EVEST or a heat course, 1 day heat course. Definitely, heat course cannot took just one day.
I'm going to the other slide to make it precise. And the point is, these are two institutions. These institutions from these countries followed 12 institutions plus Berlin entry is covering the EU training centers. You have also Sweden, Folk Bernadotte, and if we speak about the heat trainings, there are several organizations, not only Sweden.
So, no, I know, but my question is that 1 day of this heat course is acceptable for the mission staff?
No, generally the heat course take 5 days and you get a certificate for it. And it should be also approved. You have it all on the web page. I gave you the slide, and you can apply for Germany heat course. Italy is doing it, Finland and Sweden, if I'm correct. But there are different months during the schedule, and you have to apply and pay for that. There's a difference between the courses. There are different courses within this entry network. They call it pre-deployment trainings. It means once you are already selected or are going to be deployed, then you have specialized courses, for instance, rule of law, or I would say administration or media, and also for national staff. And then you have also these heat courses. The other group of training is EODS. It's election observation democratic support. Once you are in the roster of EU election missions, they are doing specialized courses, especially for their core team members, because there was a lack of qualified experts, including deputy head of mission, legal analysts, and French speakers. You know about that. And these two organizations are covering EU missions, while OSCE has already some orientation program and also several national institutions from these 10 member states, but not all of them, because OSCE has 56 member states, but only 10 of them have national institutions. Mostly from neutral states, Scandinavia, Switzerland, Austria, Germany, and Spain. And before being deployed, you can have also some e-learning courses, but the quality is not comparable with the real ones. Why I'm mentioning it is that if you fill in any application for UN or EU missions, these courses will help you. I've been for free courses last year, and what is good for it is you can apply for it, and once you are selected, the only cost you have is for the travel. I'm not making any advertisement, but the point is you get contacts there, you get good certificates, and also information which is useful for your future application. I don't know what kind of experts and area you are, which countries you want to apply for. But the specialized courses for this entry and the heat courses are sometimes required before sending the applications, while pre-deployment courses are already subject with your national state and respective authority. I was speaking with your institute, and what I understood is that you are already in the process of being part of the entry system. So I wish you good luck, but then you can see it and compare that these countries they have the OSCE institutions. Sorry. But these countries and these organizations could be very useful for your education. École nationale d'administration is also famous in France, not only for mission trainings, but also for the public administration. Sweden, Folke Bernadotte is quite famous one, and I think Germany is Center for International Peace Operations is the chief coordinator of all of them. So if you get this certificate, it will help you a lot to be forwarded for the verification process. And as I mentioned, there is also difference with EU missions once you go to any area is that at least with election observation missions we make recommendations and how to improve the situation in the country. And the difference with OSCE and UN mission is that you can support different projects in the country, and these are the specialized areas where the project can be forwarded. One example for all, we have been in Bangladesh in 2009, and the positive result of this mission, election observation mission, was a recommendation that EU will pay for arrangement electronic IDs. And this was paid via EU funds, via program Human Rights, Civil Society Governance. All this information, you have it in your development agency leaflet, but I'll give it to you. And before going to any missions, it is also important to prepare yourself with information. It seems to you that pre-deployment training or selection procedure is enough, but unfortunately, we live in such difficult areas that it is important to be online. You've heard the incident in Afghanistan last week, and these are the websites which can make your family, I think, more satisfied with the situation, because sometimes you don't know where you are, and it will be useful to know about it. There are web pages which are mostly in English. There is also a web page solely focused on Russia, like Integrum. And I made these web pages also for the legal research. They are very useful because some of you might go as prosecutor or legal advisor there, and also for non-English sources. Stratfor is more political, with George Friedman and US policy view, and Oxford Analytica gives you a good overview of the country. Usually these web pages are paid databases, but I gave you the contact in Czech Republic. I know she is a Marshall Center chief of alumni association, so I hope it will help you just to get. Yeah. Oh, that's you. Sorry, but it's nothing bad. I'm fine. But the idea is, no, thank you. So we have the person here. So the idea is just to share the information, because we have been graduated at the Marshall Center. It's not nothing bad, but the point is that even the Americans support libraries and internet databases which could be useful for your different missions. Can you agree with that? Would you mind to share with the information with you? Okay. We have been there when there was a first meeting of alumni association from our countries. And my focus is more on EU election observation missions, because they are short-time missions. They have usually approved mandate, and it's a very good introduction for the area once you want to join in. The election observation missions via EU are organized since 1993, but our countries joined it later as we became EU members in 2004. And there is an internal agreement that it is outside OSCE territory, although the first EU mission was in Russia. It is mainly focused on national elections, the chief one, parliamentary or presidential, and rarely on the local elections, which is the difference with the OSCE. And the selection of the countries is identified not publicly, and it is done by European Commission and with the Council of Ministers and European Parliament. There is a methodology published in the handbook, but it is important to know that all these international organizations signed one declaration. They respect the same principles. I made a short calendar for this year and to compare it with the other years. There is a 4 to 6 years schedule. You can compare it. But not every presidential or parliamentary elections are followed in the same country. One example, there have been elections in Ethiopia this year, but EU didn't follow it. The reason behind it is very simple, because in every election EU mission is a so-called recommendation report, final report with recommendations, what and how to improve given to the national government. Unfortunately, Ethiopian government didn't follow it, and EU decided not to participate in this mission. The other example would be Egypt. In 2009, it was not in 2011. Sorry, it was not on the list because the national government didn't sign the memorandum of understanding. But in 2014, there was a very specific situation with election observation in Egypt. As you may not know, that the EU made not the best preparation, and the logistical part didn't sign the memorandum of providing all equipment, and that was the reason observers were, how to say, just in one hotel, and they had to wait till the equipment will be given to the authorities. It's a very tricky game, because sometimes the generals or the national government knows more about the tricks and details than we think. In Ethiopia, as an example, in 2010, there is just one leading party. They provided a manual to their political leaders how to deal with EU observers, what kind of questions and answers they should provide to us to avoid the reality. So there are really tricky things. And with Egypt and their general leadership, it is more political, I would say, than about elections. And it is important to understand the role of Egypt in the whole region. So sometimes you have to take exceptions, but it is important not to underestimate the preparations and the memorandum of understanding. As you see, there are usually countries of so-called outside Europe, but many of them could be interesting for you because of the potential immigrants to Europe. And that's one way I think EU has a good policy to solve the problems, or try to solve the problems and give recommendations to the national government in the country and support the other projects to stabilize it. But it's not always successful. You know, the evacuation in Burundi is quite an issue, and there will be also other missions in the spring, in the autumn, which could be also followed. If you want to apply for such missions, you have to be in the roster. I think the Czech Republic has it as access on the internet, on the web page, and you have also the language priorities: English, French, Spanish, and Portuguese speakers, so it helps you a lot. If you have already enough experience, you can also apply, and this EODS training, you can apply for exploratory missions. There are different groupings who can apply for, and the point is that usually you cannot apply as an expert. Usually it's composed of 3 experts: legal, logistical, and security ones. But the EU is accepting 3 groups, 3 experts altogether. One company in Brno, Geotest, is already in that roster. So you'll get it. Then you have election assessment team, which is going to assess whether the election mission is going to be deployed for different political and security reasons, as it was in Libya and Afghanistan, and election expert missions in these countries. Usually there is a larger mission deployment with long and short-term observers, and it depends with the report of the exploratory missions, and it takes 6 to 12 weeks. And you have to meet respective counterparts in your province. Has anybody of you been in an election mission? Except of you? I really, if you apply for the country of your interest, I would really recommend to you to go there first for election missions. It is short and it gives you a good feedback. What is the country about? It's just practical information. Its practicalities, how many days and weeks people work there. Core team, which is composed usually up to 10 experts in the capital. They stay there longer. Long-term observers have the most difficult part because they have to evaluate the situation in the field, in the province. And the short-term observers, they go usually for 1-2 weeks for election day plus preparations and after. You have also to follow the press releases and the media policy, because there is only one person who can publish any announcement. There is also one preliminary statement after 1 or 2 days after election day, and the final report, as I mentioned, with all recommendations, but it comes sometimes several months after the election day. Sometimes it is very sensitive. I can tell you the situation in Kosovo last year. There had been elections in June, and the final report was published half a year later, because of the political negotiations about some elected persons and the coalition agreements behind. Oops. As I mentioned, there is an EU election observation roster. It is you can fill it in, but your government, your ministry, should approve you in the roster to be part of it. There is also Carter Center roster, but they have different system. You can apply for it, but it has different conditions with payment, security, and it's more American style. National Democratic Institute roster is more official, but without context and being an NGO member, you don't have real chance. But for you as future experts in the missions, you can also apply for different missions via these web pages. It's also for experts in climate, energy, or agriculture, not only democratization. I've done this picture in Pakistan with one view. It was just coincidentally. But. And this is the chief of UNAMA UN mission in Afghanistan last year. We met occasionally with our colleagues while having inspection. If there is anything, I will pass my address and all the additional materials to your coordinator, and I hope to meet you again.